welcome, y'all. It's day two of Can't Stop Hip Hop Fundamentals Evolving. While we're not with us yesterday, you are in for a treat. Today, day two, our session is dedicated to looking at hip hop music, what's happening with hip hop music in terms of criminal justice. Some people might even say injustice. We're going to be able to talk with some amazing panelists here, Eduardo, Svart, SaulPaul, and Bianca Neal. But I'm going to step out of the way here in a second because really I want to introduce our moderators for today. But before that, I'm going to let you all just continue to arrive. We're going to give you a little poll to interact with. So as you arrive, go ahead and interact with that poll, and you will see that we have your default set to keeping your screens off.
Aysha, can you turn down your music a little bit?
We have your screens off for the first part. Sorry about that, folks. I was getting into that dead prez feeling. But we have everyone's screen set off in this first part of our meeting. And once our panelists get to Q&A, we will give you an option to be part of the conversation with your screen on. So if you can't see yourself, it's okay. You're in the right place. So go ahead, fill out the poll. We want to know where people are joining us from. I want to see if you can answer some of these crafty questions. And panelists, you can be engaged with that as well. So we'll let folks arrive for a second, and then we'll get started.
They call it hip.
So, so to keep things going and flowing, again, y'all can keep interacting with that poll. I'm going to introduce our moderator for today. And then we will turn it over and launch into the business. So our moderator for today is the homie. I had the pleasure of working with this person in the classroom at Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I am on faculty. I am the head and the founder and director of HipHopEX, the organization that's bringing you this conference. I guess I should give people a little information about what we're doing here. So this would be the 4th annual Hip Hop Education Conference put on at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. However, as we are all at home together, we are not on our typical campus stomping grounds, but we are excited to bring you this remixed version of our in-person experience to these worldwide streets. And so everything that's happened at the ed school at Harvard has been because of student interest in advocating for more space for hip hop at the ed school. And so I had the opportunity when joining faculty to make sure that we could secure some structure for that. And so out of that, we have the HipHopEX Lab, and we have funding that helps us make sure some type of conference happens every year. So that's why we're here, and we hope that you will continue to rock with us. And this is day 2 of our 2-week online conversation series. And to introduce our panelist, we have our moderator, who is none other than who I I got many nicknames for this person, but I won't spill all of that tea right here. But just consider Paris Stew, Masumi, MC, I got your playlist, because if you need a playlist to fit the occasion, she got you. Paris Stew is a second-year PhD candidate at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and she fell in love when she was a shouty, the age of 4, listening to some hip-hop hooray on her family trips. She's also had experience engaging hip-hop in the classroom, and believes in its power to be a tool and a vehicle for young people. So put your virtual hands together for our moderator for today, Paris Stew, MC, I got your playlist.
Woo! I'm gonna cheer for myself. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction, Aysha. It's such a pleasure and honor to be a moderator today for this amazing panel. And we are so excited to have them speak about the really important work at the intersections of hip hop and criminal justice reform. So we're very much excited to have these folks talk with y'all. So let me, without further ado, introduce them. So we have Eduardo Svart, who is a Chilean psychologist and musician, composer, and performer. He has been working with hip-hop-based interventions in various educational contexts and places in Chile throughout the last 5 years. So that is Eduardo. Woo! Bam, 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 bam. Next, we've got SaulPaul. Am I saying that right? I got that drawl just a little bit. SaulPaul.
Yeah, there it is, right.
Who is a 4-time felon turned 4.0 graduate from University of Texas at Austin. SaulPaul went from prison incarceration to college graduation to Grammy-nominated musician, world-renowned speaker, and author. His inspiring story has been told on screen via the documentary Tower to Tower and via his memoir, Be the Change, as well as his popular TEDx talk. Give it up for SaulPaul with your virtual hands. Yes. And last but not least, we have Bianca, who is an amazing Restorative Justice Award winning filmmaker for the film Chasing Smoke, and she's a wonderful facilitator. So we're excited to have her on this panel as well. So give it up for Bianca. Woo! All right. Thank you, panelists, for being here tonight. Thank you for gracing us with your presence and your wisdom. We're incredibly grateful. I'm going to kick us off by just asking a pretty broad question to get you all started with talking about your work. So I would love for each of you to take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about what brought you to this work and how your work falls within the intersections of hip hop and criminal justice reform.
Okay.
Take it away.
Okay, I will start. As you said in the presentation, I'm a Chilean psychologist and also a music producer and performer. And well, with that background, I started investigating the use of home studio, home studio-based intervention in different contexts, like schools and educational stuff. So I will share my screen so I can show you some pictures while I talk. First, I would like you said, I work in jail context, juvenile prison with hip hop production intervention, and I've published 2 albums from those contents. So I will show you a little bit.
La adversidad, así que dale mamá, enfrentándome a la adversidad, así que dale mamá, tú tranquila nada más, vamos para adelante, nunca miramos para atrás. Soy el Joaquín de la Calera y la pulenta soy de veras. Con una canción rompo las barreras, sigo paso a paso subiendo la escalera. Yo vengo de abajo donde con pistolas manos se genera y por par de pesos matan a cualquiera. La 9mm es tu única fiel compañera. Pero ahora estoy preso por culpa de mi acto. Me encuentro aquí en un cuarto encerrado. Estoy entero, psicoseado. Mi familia, puro que he pensado. Y de ellos nunca me he olvidado. Mi mamá me decía que no sea asobado, que el camino que elegí no iba a llegar a ningún lado. Pero yo fui el embarado que a la pobreza estoy pagando con 2 años encerrado. Voy tranquilo nomás, busco mi libertad. De cabro chico enfrentándome a la adversidad. Así que dale mamá, tú tranquila nada más. Vamos para adelante, nunca miramos para atrás. Voy tranquilo nomás, busco mi libertad. De cabro chico enfrentando.
Well, that belongs to recording in this content. As I say, I work like my interest is to take production studio into in prison context, juvenile prison here in Chile, which is a very complex setting for working for several reasons. And what I basically do is like I take home studio device and we record and we produce beats and then we liberate it in the internet. Like we're looking to give a voice to these kids that are in prison for different reasons. They have like 15 years, 14 years, up to 18. And like, yeah, if you can see here the pictures, we work everything since lyric writing, beat production, recording, mixing, mastering, everything. And usually we work with kids that have like no experience in music, but we don't teach them music really, like we don't make a music class, but we take the studio into the jail and we just create and produce, and like they learn by doing. Here you can see, for example, the software that we're using, that's Ableton Live projected over the background. Here's like one day that we took some kids into a studio recording. That there you can see Franz Mesco, which is a very good saxophone player here in Chile. The kids write, I also write, we record. We also record instruments, we record vocals, and also we make like live shows. This is a tour we make in different centers with this group of kids that were singing and like live performance. And yeah, that's like basically what I do. I try to give these kids the most realistic approach to music production, from like having the first idea and recording it. And no, it's been amazing. Like on one side, the product that we have made, like the albums that I will share the links later so you can find them in YouTube. But also like to see that in this context, like not only that you have people with a lot of talent, but with a lot of things to say, and there's a lot of people that want to hear what they have to say. And I think that that's like the basics of my intervention, no? Like giving these kids the setting to say what they have to say it in a stylish way, to use hip hop, to use music, and to get other people to hear them. That's basically what I do. Yeah, that's it. Well, this is the cover of the album, which was an actual picture that we took inside the class. And something that is very interesting is that, as you can see, like in all these pictures, there's no faces of the kids, because of course we are working in prison, juvenile prison context, and also with underage kids. So like, since they're in prison and they're underage, we cannot use their faces, but we can use and show their voices. And I think that's very interesting as a tool in music production, because it will be very difficult to make a movie with these kids, but it's very good to make an album, because like you can protect their identity, but at the same time show the world like these realities, the life they are going through, the experiences that they have. So yeah, that's what I do.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you so much for sharing your important work with us. SaulPaul, do you want to go next?
I can do that. Eduardo, where are you based at?
I'm in Santiago, the capital city of Chile.
Sweet. So once I can get on a plane again, if I end up in Chile, then we can connect and we can do some work together. I love it.
Yeah, I recommend after the winter because it's very cold here.
Well, sweet. Well, thank you. What's up, everyone? I am SaulPaul. It says on my hat. This is usually my selfie brim, but ever since the quarantine, it's my Zoom brim. I am SaulPaul, musician with the message. I'm rocking my man. I'm rocking this hip hop grew up sweatshirt. I love it because I mean, like, this is my heart right here. Hip hop grew up. I grew up hip hop. I'm from H-Town, Texas. I have this unique story. They mentioned it in my intro, how I transitioned from prison incarceration to college graduation. I'm very, very passionate about hip hop and the power of hip hop because I am hip hop, and hip hop influenced me. And I've become successful in life, and I'll go to the other piece, but it's so crazy because I feel like I have privilege. Even though basically like my mom died when I was 3, my dad left me before I was born. I was in foster care. I grew up in the ghetto, dealt with extreme poverty, extreme circumstances, was juvenile incarceration, got arrested by the FBI when I was 17 years old, went to the Texas State Penitentiary when I was 20. And having went through all that, I still say like I feel privileged, but it's because I grew up hip hop. So now in the world, I don't know, in the world of social good, in the world of business, and any other culture that I operate in, I just feel like I have this privilege because I grew up hip hop, and hip hop is so powerful, and it influenced me. But I also own that hip hop influenced me negatively, so that impacts my work that I do with young people. I'm gonna play one little video. Let me see if I maybe. Let's see. And shout out to all of my folks that came through. Yeah, so this video okay. Can y'all see that, or do I need to share my screen?
Yeah, if you can share your screen, that little green button at the bottom.
All right. Let's see, share. Desktop.
There we go. Awesome.
So this is a video, so it's kind of hard to talk about the work that we do. I like to sum it up and say I entertain, I inspire, I empower. I use my platform as an artist and my art of hip hop to help amplify messages, not just my own, but I usually partner with organizations. And these organizations vary, whether it's a school, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a government agency, whether it's a CSR, corporate social responsibility program of a Fortune 500 company. I know what my agenda is, change lives. And when people have agendas and there's an overlap, then I found that, you know, like in that hip hop sense, like it's a hot track, it's a hop on it, or I got this, you should get on this remix, and we can amplify our efforts. I'm gonna play a video that of a festival we produced. We being my organization, the Be the Change Network. You find out more about that at btcnetwork.live. But we produced a festival. We did about 10 of these last year in 2019. This festival took place in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'll let the video do the talking from there.
Earlier this year, during a meeting of the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge recipients, Buncombe County Sheriff Quentin Miller met SaulPaul, a songwriter, musician, producer, TEDx talker, and community activist who performs with an important message that creating positive change within a community must involve everyone coming together and working together to be the change. That one meeting months ago led to a great gathering at Asheville Middle School on a recent Saturday. Hundreds of children, parents, county departments, community leaders, nonprofit organizations, law enforcement officers, and more gathered together to promote a community of one.
I first saw him in Houston, Texas. I was there with folks from Buncombe County, the Grant Foundation, and he was the keynote speaker. And some of the things that he spoke about, it automatically made me start thinking about Buncombe County, the things that we were working on as a foster grant, committee, as well as things I'm seeing as being the sheriff, justice reform, right? We talked about restorative justice. And these are just a couple of topics that he spoke on there that I thought that would resonate, not only resonated for me, but would resonate for the community as a whole.
My goal for empowering cities to recognize that they can be the change is to recognize that they can dictate what their community looks like. Like in my town, we have a slogan called, I live here, I give here. And it's like if you're part of the community, then you want your community to reflect you. You want it to be inviting, welcoming, encouraging. You want to feel included. You want to feel celebrated. What it's really about is getting everybody to the table and recognizing that they have the opportunity to have their voice heard and make a difference in the impact in their community and be the change. And so for those that were here, it was awesome because will be the pioneers, the first folks at the table. The table hasn't been set yet. We're just getting folks to get ready to help build the table. And then we're going to have everyone come join the table and make sure that they get their input heard so they can dictate what the next decade, next century of Asheville looks like. So I'm excited about that. So, yeah, that's a nice clip. It shows what we do in the community. I don't want it to be missed. That was really a collaboration between myself and the sheriff, my organization, and the sheriff, the Buncombe County Sheriff's Department, basically an ex-felon and a law enforcement officer. And that's big, and that's a big deal. Like that, it took a while for me to even be comfortable to work with law enforcement, but as I focused on the bigger picture, and saw that it was about communities. And as I met some awesome individuals who I recognized ultimately had the same heart, like that gentleman, Sheriff Miller, that gentleman, Sheriff Quentin Miller. I mean, he kept it hip hop. Like he said, I gave a keynote. He came up to me after it was over. I did what I did. So there was a lot of people online. He waited till everybody got out the way. And then he came up and he was like, hey, I want to impact my community. I love it. I share this. This is one of the nuggets I want people to get about, like, identifying community partners. Be clear on what your goal is. That way you can recognize the opportunity when it presents itself. Because he's basically like, man, I'm the law. I heard the story. You're awesome. The music, that's dope. I think that work in my community. He's like, I'm supposed to enforce the law. I need to work with somebody who can, my hands are tied once they get to me. I need to work with an advocate, with an activist, with a community leader who can, like, create an intervention, who can impede them from getting to me. And it was cool because then we ultimately trained law enforcement, because law enforcement has some issues, if you ask me, but we got to train 50 officers. While we were there, we worked with the judicial, with the county judges, with law enforcement. We worked with nonprofit. We worked with activists, because really it's our premise is restorative, to where it's about an ecosystem. And that's what we do. And I'll get to share more if you have questions, but that's my intro. I have a campaign called Beat the Change, and it's about empowering communities, and that's what we go do.
Thank you, SaulPaul. Thank you for sharing your important work with us in that beautiful video. And we will definitely get to be able to talk a little bit more about that too, as we open it up for questions later. But before we do, Bianca, we would love to hear from you about your work, what brought you to this work, and how it sits within the intersections of hip hop and criminal justice reform.
Yes, awesome. Well, I am so thankful to be here. I really appreciate everybody on the call. I love this community. I tuned in yesterday. You guys are doing such a wonderful job creating community. Keep going forward. I think that's what hip hop is all about. I just loved hip hop growing up, and it's actually partly how I got introduced to criminal justice in the first place, and just reform. I went to USC undergrad film school. I went to UT Austin for graduate school for film, and that's actually how SaulPaul and I met. I had a person, he was a good friend of mine. He said, you need to meet this guy. He's in a film and hip hop, and maybe you guys need to work together. Maybe you guys can collaborate together. And so, interestingly enough, he told me a story. I, grew up different. I never, coming from California, coming from Los Angeles, Texas, is a whole different culture too. And just learning about his life story, and I was like, we need to make a movie about your life. And so we collaborated, made a documentary about his life. And him telling me his story really just exposed me to what life was like, being exposed to the criminal justice system. And it just opened up my eyes. Shortly after that, we started touring across the country. So he would perform, and then we made a film together, and we would basically share the film. And it just continued to evolve and grow. And so recently, my most recent film is called Chasing Smoke, and that's the award-winning film. That's in conjunction with restorative justice. There's an awesome group here in Austin called Life Anew, and I'm going to show just a short clip of the film, really just an introduction. But really, I think what I love about hip hop so much is that hip hop brings so many people from so many different places together, and it's communal. It's very just warm and welcoming, and I also want to shine a light on all the people a lot of people on the phone call are already working in their communities, working with young people, whether it's crime whether it's criminal justice right now or whether it's working with youth, so that they don't end up in situations where they have to be involved with criminal justice. And just want to highlight those people and say thank you for what you do. And just speaking for myself as a filmmaker, it's interesting because there's different forms of activism, and there's different forms of getting involved. And so you may or may not be the person who goes and speaks to the people who are behind bars, or you may not be a lawyer, or you may not even know somebody, but it doesn't mean you can't be involved. We all have a part to play. So whether that's advocacy, or whether it's knowing somebody that you have a relationship with who has been in prison, who has had that experience, and just being able to advocate to people who don't know about that. But I just want to share just a word of encouragement. Use your gifts, use your talents, use your sphere of influence, and use that power to be able to create change. So I'm going to share a quick clip, and then I'll be open for any questions, and we'll go from there. So.
Hopefully, your video plays well, Bianca, because you're getting choppy right now, but be sure to watch the chat. We'll let you know if something happens.
Okay.
If you are searching for the right keywords,
And of course, there's an ad.
Keyword Magic Tool by SE.
Not video.
African Americans are just predisposed for bad behavior, or is something wrong with the system? As a young man, what is the one thing that you need from every teacher around you? One of the things that you need from us as adults? What I need from adults is for them to feel like my God knew what I've been through. To respect me. So all that to respect that, I don't respect nobody. They sit there and nag you on here, and they don't know what you're going through, but you keep on attacking to the property, so they make you want to take steps out. So you snap on them and tell them to leave you alone. They don't understand what you've been going through. They won't let you talk. They think that they don't have to change. That's what that is.
So I'm keeping it short. I know because we're watching video. Not sure about if it's choppy or not, but the film basically tracks the city of Austin actually life and news efforts in the city of Austin, and really addressing the criminal justice from a restorative justice perspective, instead of just in the film is titled Chasing Smoke. So instead of trying to put out a fire through watering smoke, you're actually going to the root of the problem. And so I think for me, again, going back to hip hop, it's just about community, and it's about the voices that are being heard. And I'll be open up for questions later, but just want to give a brief overview about the film.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you for sharing the segment of that film. And thank each of you for just such your wisdom and the amazing and important work you're doing. And I appreciate, especially Bianca, what you had said in your talk about the fact that everyone comes to this work from a different place and doing different things that are all important. Everyone has a role in this work. And so I appreciate you saying that, because I know that definitely resonated with some folks in this room as well. And so as we are gearing up and moving into the Q&A portion of this session, I just want to remind folks that they can start submitting questions to the panelists, as well as in the Q&A. And while you all are doing that, I'm going to kick us off by asking kind of a two-part question from our panelists. And so you all can answer that and continue to chat a little bit before we get to everyone else's questions as well. So my two-part question's a little long because, I like to make things a little complex, but, I think the work that you all are doing is incredibly important. And I'm wondering this is my first part, how has your work disrupted and dismantled the stereotypes and deficit perceptions of Black and brown youth and adults that you work with who are caught within the criminal justice system, right? So how have those perceptions changed through the work that you've done with them, with those communities, to the outside, to the people that see your work on the outside, to law officials, for example, that you work with, or to the general public? And then my second part question is, how has the self-perceptions of the folks you work with that are caught up in the criminal justice system, how has their self-perception about their identities transformed through this important work? So perceptions from outside and then perceptions of self as a two-part.
Well, for me, the first part, you asked about like dismantling prejudice towards colored people. And in my case, well, it's different because in Chile, we have now a very upgrowing population of migrants that are coming from other countries of Latin America, and we're starting to have like the first, in this time we're having the first approaches to like intercultural contact, and also like colored or Afro descendants, So I will not like talk about that in specific, but I will go like more broadly into the subject of prejudice and how we can battle that throughout, for example, what I do, that is music production in this kind of context. First of all, I think that when you listen to the lyrics or to the albums that we record in prison, you see that these kids are not only talking about like guns and party or drugs and like, I don't know, like I am in the street and I am the meanest of the meanest, like, which is like the general prejudice of the things that you will find there. You find like love lyrics, you find lyrics that reflect about society, about social class, about prejudice. They also talk about their families, their mothers. They write a lot to the mothers, to the people they love outside. And like you see, there's a much more complexity in the lyrics, and therefore in these people, than what you usually think from the prejudice of people being in jail, And I think that like seeing the lyrics and seeing the songs they make, like help you to show that, like what's the real depth of these people, what's going inside of them. And it's not only what like the prejudice that you might have from movies or from TV, like they all talk about robbing or whatever, like this is real people, and they have like all the variety of themes and problems and reflections or thoughts as anyone else has like in society, So I think that's a way to show like those prejudice. And also like in the second part that you asked is like, how does it person that goes through the workshops or the production contents, how they change their self-perception, well, that's amazing. Like I have some kids that arrive to the workshops and they don't know how to write or they don't know how to read, and they have never been like really interested into that. Like they've been sometime to school or maybe never or very little, and they don't see how writing or reading is part of their life, or like how is it useful. And we say, okay, so let's make a song. And they say, no, but I cannot write, and I don't know how to read. So, okay, you make it up, and I will write for you, and then we'll go on. So they start like improvising. I write from them, then we start correcting and all that. And then they see that they can do it, like they can write, even though they don't know like the technical part. But with the help of others, they can do it. And then we record that, and they listen to their song. And like they see like, and they listen that they have stuff to see, that people is interested in what they can see, that the other kids in prison or outside like the work that they do. So like these kids have an opportunity to explore and to see how they are capable of creating the culture in which they live. Like many times we record songs and they take it into the rooms, and everyone is in the prison is listening to the music. Sometimes we arrive there and they're listening to the music. So you see how this kind of interventions give the kids the opportunity not only to create and like engage in artistic projects, but also to be the creators of the cultural context in which they are growing up. And when they experience that, and when they see the effects that have, the self-perception of themselves change, and they see that they are capable of saying interesting things, and they are talented, and that they are not only like kids that are in jail or kids that have been engaged in crime or whatever. They are also artists or sportmen or academists or like whatever, and like that brings down like the prejudice from the people outside, but also their own prejudice that these kids have because of the places that they've been born or the context in which they have grown up. And sometimes the prejudice is inside themselves. And like with these activities, we are helping to break this prejudice from the inside and from the outside. And so like, look, this is not only like an in-prison kid. This is also like a human being. I have feelings, have reflection, have thoughts, and he wants to share. And everyone wants to hear outside, and like maybe we don't know or we don't have the chance to do it. So that's like kind of it.
Thank you, Eduardo. SaulPaul, Bianca, would you like to respond to these questions as well?
Internal, could you refresh me? I know internal, external, but could you refresh me on the first? I want to make sure I touch on that.
Sure. I wanted to know how your work has been used to disrupt and dismantle the stereotypes about Black and Brown youth and marginalized youth and adults that you work with who are caught up in the criminal justice system. And then my second part was about how has this work changed the self-perceptions of the folks that you work with?
Awesome. There's also a question in the Q&A, and it was labeled to me, and this connects. I can't say the name right. RITSE. I'll just say R Boogie. R Boogie said, you mentioned working with police departments on officer training. Can you share an example of something you think was effective from those trainings? That connects to the internal, external. Again, restorative justice circles are a key part of what we do. And so getting people to the table. My unique perspective is it's kind of like I'm a felon that arrested by the FBI, went to the penitentiary for trapping and being good at it. And then I graduated with a 4.0 from a prestigious university. Like that just gives me this unique perspective of like, I'm good on this side and I'm good on that side. And what I've learned is that often the sides, there's not that much overlap. There's what people think over here, like what this group thinks, and what they think over here. So it's been amazing to provide a platform. I'll post a video in the link. There's a person on here named Shannon Sandrea. She started an organization called The Cypher over 10 years ago here in Austin. I was on the board of it. And through that organization, we were able to give voice to a lot of Black and brown youth. These were youth who, fill in the blanks, life was bad, blah, blah. They were on the outside looking in, even when it came to their public school. But through hip hop, through music production, and through the platform, through the performing, It gave them voice. It gave them influence. They totally saw themselves different. They saw themselves as leaders. More than half a dozen are literally community leaders in the great city of Austin, Texas at this point, and it came purely from their participation in this program. They started to realize that they had worth, and not just worth, but then they started to see their real value. And I'm big on that, like being able to show people like, yeah, like you have this art, you have this power, you use these words, you can use them, and then like the intrinsic value that comes with that. And then on the other side, externally, it changed how people, they felt good about themselves because they were killing it and they were growing and they were prospering. And on the outside looking in, people saw, they redefined hip hop for a lot of people. People like, and going back to the whole cops, like there's an organization in Austin called Jail to Jobs. We recently hosted a conference. We got adjudicated youth, that's youth that are locked up, at the table. And we also had law enforcement at the table. And really, like the youth we work with, like they're really raw. They're not just victims of society. They're really, really raw, and they're leaders. And I think that's something that people often miss. We were talking about juveniles, if we're talking about criminal, if we're talking about adjudicated youth, young youth, people often see them as like, whoa, like the victim or as the lower. But the truth is, in the culture, they're like royalty. They're the kings. They did stuff bad enough to where they went to prison. So they're leaders. And so it's key when you can get them to think different, because there are others that follow. And then because they're bosses, and like, there's no other way to say it, right? They're bosses. And so it was good to have boss talk and to be able to impact and influence law enforcement that could go back and change that culture that needs to be changed, and be able to get people to the table. So I think that's an answer of like how it provided platform for youth to see themselves differently, and then externally for people to see them differently. Bianca?
I would say,
You're freezing just a bit.
I think
Bianca?
Can you hear me?
We can hear
you.
you.
You're a little bit froze.
Do you want to turn off your screen and maybe just do audio? Maybe that might help.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't help an artist. This is like dead space. We can't have dead space on stage.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Right.
Yes, we can hear you, Bianca.
Yeah, it still seems froze. I say we move on and then we can come back. Like maybe she can work that out.
For sure. Yeah. Bianca, maybe you can type in some of your thoughts on this question in the chat to all the attendees as we move on to some of the next questions I see in the Q&A, and then we'll try to come back to you, Bianca, when the reception's a little bit better. So a couple of questions that have been coming up have been around the role of gender in this work. So I wanted to get to two questions on this. One was a more broad question from Shannon, who mentioned, how do you get more young women involved in this work? I know many of you have the passion, but don't feel safe sharing their words, music, etc. That was a question for Shannon generally about the role of women in gender. And then Nina specifically had a question towards Eduardo, saying that I recently saw the film Niñas Araña, which deals with illegal land grabs, marginal neighborhoods, and the challenges faced by girls living in these communities. I was wondering if you primarily work with young men or if there are opportunities for gender mainstreaming in justice reform projects. So again, just this broad question of elevating the voices and the narratives and work of women in this space. So if you both can speak to that, and hopefully we'll get Bianca's thoughts on this as well in the chat.
It's a very interesting question, like the thing of gender. In my specific experience, I've worked with more male young men in general, like, I don't know, like in 80% of my experience. But I've had some experience working with women, like 4 or 5 of them, and we have recorded and made songs and all that, and it's been like super good, like no difference. It's the same. Also, I've made some work of girls and boys together also, which sometimes it's not so easy in this kind of context because things are very separated. Like in Chile, generally there's center only for male and another separated only for women. So it's not so easy to get it mixed. But for example, in one experience, I got to record with 2 or 3 singers, female singers, and it was super interesting, like how they had not only like all the problems and prejudice of being in prison, but also being woman and woman in prison, which is super different, you know, like somehow, at least in the Chilean case, like it's not so bad to be in prison if you're a male, you know, if you're a man, but for somehow like being a woman in prison is like even worse, like socially, not socially accepted, you know, like it's still like a man thing to go into prison. So I think it's super interesting, like when we work with women, once, well, on the one side to make this visible, like there is women in these processes, they have a lot of things to say. And another thing I want to comment is I also had the experience twice of working with people that were transitioning in gender, you know, like, or more than transitioning, I would say exploring, because they're still adolescents. So I wouldn't say like they're like definitely transition in one direction or another, but like that's super interesting in creative work. Because for example, I worked for like 6 months with a girl that was transitioning into being like a boy. And like you could see like not like the linear process, but like one day she was talking like I'm him, another day she was writing like I'm a her. And I think that this was a super good setting for her to explore, like if she wants to be considered as a her or as a him. And that was super interesting, like how in the way that the lyrics evolve, you can see how the transition or the exploration also evolve. And I think that that's something very interesting, like in exploring genders throughout art, no? That you can give them the space not only to say I'm this or I'm that, but to show they're exploring, and you like an adult to like guide them and to give them the space to just explore, you know. And I think that that is something that not only in jail context, also in general education is missing a lot, now, like this place to explore, to show everyone that you are exploring, and like you are 15 years old and you have so much possibilities. And I think that creative work, especially music production, is a very good landscape for that, you know, to see how your identity is shifting, like the questions you have. And sometimes the questions are more important than the answers. And I try to give a lot of space to that, to the question they have about their own identity, their own life, or the life they want. So yeah, I think that it's very interesting that we can give more space to both like male and female, and also to like to embrace also like sexual orientation, you know, like what about gay community or LGBT, you know, or people that is transitioning from one gender to another, you know, how we embrace that and how we make it part of the creative processes so that they can find a part where this is welcome and where they can like develop and think about themselves with others.
Thank you, Eduardo. SaulPaul?
Looking at Shannon's question, how do you get more young women involved? I know many who have the passion but don't feel safe sharing their words, music, etc. I'm big on. I think that goes back to what I was talking. I would say hip hop. Hip hop is awesome. I know there's somebody else in the queue as well. Some Lady Light, a friend of mine, she had a question that said, "What is the most important thing you've learned in your work over the years?" My approach has always been, I don't know, I'm just focused on the work. Like Bianca is my partner. We've worked together 15 years. Lady Light, I've known her just as long. But it's always been about, and so Shannon's asking this question. I don't know, I guess me, it's always been about like the work. Just like in hip hop, it would be about the song. Like what's dope is like, who do you put on the hook, or how do you do this? How do you do that? So, but maybe I'm naturally inclusive. And so if we want to make people feel more involved, I think we have to be purposely inclusive and create that space. But that's in anything. That would go back to restorative justice again, like in setting the table. And for those that have privilege, those that have the position, part of the burden goes with that to have the emotional intelligence or empathy, the capacity to understand how somebody else might feel, and go above and beyond to figure out how to get those people to the table. Because in my work, I don't know, really, I don't see that bias. I'm sure it exists, but I think it's always been strategic to have everybody at the table. And so if women aren't feeling involved, to be purposeful and maybe highlight the ones that you have on deck. That's all I can say about that.
Thank you, SaulPaul. Bianca, were you able to connect your audio? I just want to make sure if you had words on this particular question, if you wanted to answer that as well.
Yes, I'm able to connect my audio. Can you hear me well now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've definitely been quite a bit of juvenile detention facilities and prisons, and getting involved as a female. At first, for me, just to be honest, my experience, it was challenging because it's very male. Obviously, there's many males when you're going in, and so and you have to, in a sense, you kind of have to have a little bit of thick skin, and you have to show that you're not scared, because if you do, it's kind of like I mean, it's just different. Regardless if you're in jail or not in jail, you're in this society. It's like the way that you carry yourself as a female kind of affects the way that men treat you. And so just being in when you're inside, it's just being very, I would say for me, and it's interesting because it's how I did with the music industry as well. It's like you have to be very diplomatic, and you have to know who you are, and you have to be very confident. And I think at the same time, it's like once you are diplomatic and once you're confident, then it's like we're all equals. There's not like, oh, I'm a male, I'm a female, which of course there is a distinction, but it's like you realize that you're more like a person and a human being than there is like a separation. It's interesting to me. Earlier, I wanted to comment about how it has changed me. It's changed me immensely. It's really interesting because for the first time when I went, first time I went to any facility it was juvenile detention, and it was about, I would say 16 to 18-year-olds, males. They're muscular. They're growing. They're have a lot of testosterone, and then this fear came over me, and I was like, oh my gosh. But then as I realized, as I heard them share their stories, I'm like, these are just really big kids that have been let down somewhere along the line. So whether it's family that hasn't been there for them, it's really just family, honestly. Like a lot of the stories that I heard were, whether it was a mom or a dad, or mom and dad, or, the whole family just wasn't there, or maybe just society and the structure wasn't there, whether it was school and, that lack of encouragement. And so you just see like a lot of young kids who ended up becoming grown adults and just didn't have that support that they needed. And so it just changed me because I feel like it's humanizing when you go, in the sense of not the system in the sense of like going to a facility. That's definitely not humanizing, but being around people and hearing their stories, that's you're humanizing. And it's very humbling because you realize at the end of the day, we're all just people. We've all made some mistakes in line, and some people just got caught. So yeah.
If I could just add, because she inspired something. But yeah, if we're just approaching this from, I guess, maybe hip hop and criminal justice reform, or doing hip hop, or going in prisons, overall, I would say a woman's touch is unique. Like I've always been smart. I purposely include Bianca because I'm like, you see things different than I do. So when we do work, it's just a different take. I speak to a different part, and so it touches that whole person. So for those that are working, yeah, going back to that question, figure out how to involve women in your work, no matter how great your work is, because it's just a different perspective. The same way I tell nonprofits that serve communities, and then you need people from the community in your work. Like us men need women involved because there's just a different angle. It speaks to something totally different. So.
Absolutely. Go ahead. Go ahead, Eduardo.
I think it's super interesting what Bianca says about like these kids that are in prison, but most of the time they're not treated like kids, you know, because, and that's the paradox of juvenile system. Like these kids, at least in Chile, you know, they cannot vote, they cannot drive a car, they cannot have a house, they cannot have a contract, they cannot like make decisions for the country, but they can be in jail. And that's like very complex to deal with. Like why you are old enough to be apart from your family and to be alone in jail, but you are not old enough to make all of these kind of decisions. So many times I think that what happens is that these kids are treated like adults, you know, because they are like going through something that is kind of more of adult context than child context. And I think that that's also very important of these like art-based interventions or hip hop, is that it also helps them to connect with them being kids, like 14 years old, 15 years old, and give them the chance like to be creative, to have fun. And like it's, I think it's fundamental, no? Like when they have fun, they also remember, and you remember they're kids. Like once I took the kids like into a field trip because there was kids from a special jail that they could go out sometimes. And like when we were in the streets, they were like, oh yeah, we're all mean and we're all tough. But then when I led them, they were like, oh, please, can you take us to the subway because we don't know how to get there and we're like afraid. And it's like, yeah, you are 14, you know, like you're a kid, but you are going through prison. And to deal with that is very difficult because they are in and out of the world. So I just wanted to notice that.
Yes. And just on that point, just kind of wanting to echo everything that you all said and also recognize that as more Black and Brown women and young girls are being placed within the criminal justice system, it is really important to center the voices and narratives of women within this work, and also to bring more women into this work and elevate that work all together. We all need each other to do this work effectively. And also just going to your point also, Eduardo, about just the adultification of Black and Brown youth in particular, but also other marginalized youth and youth who are especially caught up in the criminal justice system, regardless whether it's international or in the US, how suddenly they're seen as adults, even though developmentally, from an adolescent development standpoint, they're not necessarily adults, right? And so thinking about how to support them in this work when they're still youth. So thank you for bringing that up. For the sake of time, we have so many other questions in the Q&A. We will definitely be going over a little bit. So I just want to let folks know who are in the room that we are going to try our best to get to some of these other questions. And if you would still like to stay on after 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we would love to continue to have you on. So, and Lady Light, I wanted to actually save your question towards the end because I think that would be a wonderful wrap-up question for the panelists. So I do see you. But we'll definitely come back to that. And also for the sake of time, these other questions that we're seeing in the chat, I think maybe we can have one panelist answer each of those depending on what question seems most relevant to your work and what you would like to respond to. So we have a question about systems. One is around the education teacher prep system, and one is around the mental health system. So I wanted to bring those two up first. So one is from Kim, who asked, do any of you work with teacher education programs? Until recently, I was teaching at University of Hawaii in the secondary teacher ed program, and there is much work to be done in the areas of a diversity education, teacher identity, and relational pedagogy. And one of the reasons why Kim brought that up was because, as we know, the school to prison pipeline phenomenon and how that works, essentially the harsh discipline procedures against Black and Brown students, who then funnels them into the prison system. Because of that phenomenon, have any of you worked with teacher prep education programs and can speak to any types of training or support you've provided in that space? So I'm gonna hold that as one question. And the second question that one of you can respond to is from Q-Chip, who said, As a mental health therapist working with men dealing with substance abuse and or drug charges with legal issues, what are some things we can do to bring information to the system within the mental health world? So those are two questions I'm going to pose right now. If each of you can take one of those questions, that would be great.
Well, I've done quite a bit with teacher education. Half of the work we do is with public schools and teacher education, training and whatnot. I think a big deal, it starts at the top. We found success, so I guess the simple answer is yes, we work with that. We found success training teachers by finding our allies, the authority that has the person who has the authority and the position, AKA a superintendent or a principal, who can say, hey, we want training, this is what we want to do. So if they get it, then it makes it that much easier. And then once you have that platform, the goal is to, what's the word? Many times they just don't know. You can apply this to so much. We often forget, and I think we label a lot of stuff. So we initially it becomes a trigger, and it's this and it's that. And like, for example, we don't have time to talk about it, but I think a lot of stuff that's called white privilege is really white ignorance. But if you call it white privilege, that's a different conversation. White ignorance would be like, they don't know. And it's not letting them off the hook. It's not giving an excuse. It's like, they don't know. So how will they know unless you teach them? And so you have to start teaching that because they're being ignorant. And so when they work with our Black and brown youths, when they put them in that pipeline, when they have this unconscious bias, another training that I do, their bias is unconscious. They don't realize it. They don't understand this. They don't understand that. And so it really helps when you train educators and you start from that perspective of like ignorance versus privilege or ignorance versus anything. So then you can train them. And we've had a lot of aha moments, and then that's when systems can change as well. Because we also know that you can change all the people, but if it's institutional, which we often recognize it is, institutional racism or whatever else, you also have to change the institution, not just the people. So you train the people and you change the systems.
Thank you, SaulPaul.
Thank you.
And in regards to the question of the mental health system, Eduardo or Bianca, one of you would like to take that on?
Okay, I can try. Well, first, I think it's a very big question because I think that one of the main obstacles that you find when working in this context is the drug abuse. And I don't mean only like the drugs that the kids get in the outside or the drugs that go into the jail, which is a lot also, but also like the drugs that are used by the system, you know, like I'm a psychologist, and I think that at least in the Chilean case, these kids are completely over-medicated, you know, like the standard procedure of mental health for me includes like over-medication for everyone. Like you go in and you start being very hardly medicated, and that's very difficult to work because one day you have one kid with one like characteristics, next week he's super high on like medicine or maybe another drug. So like the setting is always changing. And I think that one thing that is super important is that the treatment that the kids are receiving inside the centers can continue when they get outside, because I see a lot of kids that are super hardly medicated inside, like so they don't get trouble. When they go outside, their treatments are cut so that they don't have more options like to go into other drugs because of the anxiety they are feeling. And I think like if we really want to medicate children to help them, then this treatment must continue outside as they do inside, because if not, it's not medication. It's just like to keep them calm and like to deal with them in an easiest way, you know? And I think that going to what we're talking about, like hip hop based intervention in this kind of context, I think that like engaging in creative work, and in my case in music production, gives you concrete tools so that you can deal with your anxiety, you can have a better self-esteem, self-confidence. And in general, I think that hip hop gives you concrete tools like to deal with life, you know? Like I think that at the root of drug problems, most of the time there's like like you don't want to deal with life, or you're not being able to deal with life, or you don't have the tools to deal with life. So I think like I would say those two things. On one side, through hip hop, we can give concrete tools, useful tools to deal with life, and that way, like maybe not having to go for drugs to be able to deal with your life. And on the other side, I think it's very important that if we are already like super medicating these kids, which I think should be less, at least we should be responsible of continuing the treatments outside. Like for me, there's no point in like giving a lot of mental psychopharmaceutics inside jail contents, and then when the kids are free, like they get nothing, you know, and that's pointless.
Thank you, Eduardo. So I noticed that some folks need to leave, and that's totally okay. We are going to wrap up with one more thing. But before we do, I just want to remind folks that we have a ton of amazing panelists like tonight. If you enjoyed tonight, we have more this week and next week. Tomorrow's session, which is Wednesday, April 29th, is Healing Through Hip Hop, the intersection of art, education, and revolution in communities of color. And that's also going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same link, so definitely join us for that. Armani will be actually moderating that panel, so we're excited for that. And it relates to a lot of the things that we're talking about tonight. So I just wanted to remind folks before we move on to this last question, which I'm going to try to combine some of the different things that were asked. So one, we had Lady Light saying, she asked, what is the most important thing you've learned in your work over the years? And I think that's a great combo with a question that Carl had about, in hindsight, what is a word of advice you would give to yourself at the beginning of your journey? And Eduardo, no, not Eduardo, I'm sorry. I'm looking through these chats. Raymundo had mentioned if you all can maybe do a freestyle at the end of this session. So I'm thinking either or, you can answer the question, the two questions, what's the most important thing you learned, or what advice you would give yourself when you first started this journey, in a kind of regular oral verbal format, or you can choose to do it in a freestyle and drop some knowledge that way instead through that medium. So does that work for you panelists?
I love it. I'm just like, I'm just thinking, I love it.
I should do it like in English or Spanish?
Woo! But either. And then maybe for folks who may not know, you can just translate afterwards, letting us know what you said. That would be awesome. Or giving us like a brief wrap up, like this is what I was talking about in my freestyle. All right.
Yeah.
So we are going to kick it off. Who wants to begin? Go ahead. You can talk, you can freestyle rap, whatever you want to do, answering those questions. Bianca, you want to start?
Yeah.
Bianca's going to start.
I'll probably talk because I know they'll probably end up with a freestyle. So I'll get mine out the way first because I can't freestyle. What I would say, if I would have known, I think the biggest thing was just personal bias, just because I had never grown up with anybody who had been in jail or prison. And so not having that experience, I would have been like, you know, you need to jump on this faster. And also just to encourage others, like there's so much bias that we have because we don't know people of different walks. And so just the importance of being able to step out of our comfort zone and be able to meet different people and yeah, just be inclusive of different people's perspectives, people's walks of life, and to just be there for people because you never know what they're going through.
Dope. Thanks, Bianca, for those words of wisdom and for dropping that knowledge on us. SaulPaul, Eduardo, who wants to go next?
Oh.
Hit him with the bilingual, Eduardo, in the chat. They want bilingual. Bilingual.
Who we got?
You got it? No? I'll go.
Okay. Go ahead, SaulPaul.
All right, sweet. I'm watching my chat. So I like to freestyle. So if you got some, I don't know, Give me some topics in the chat, but this is a wrap up, right? Hip hop don't stop. Let me see. I'm gonna do it like this. This is hip hop. I ain't gonna just go acoustic. Check it out. I'm gonna just make this up. Y'all don't need to see it or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? I got my loop pedal down there, so I'm just gonna make this up. We're gonna do a freestyle. I'm just gonna freestyle, make this up. Let's see. All right. All right. Sweet. Hey. Check it out. Freestyle off the top. I'm just sharing my heart. Panelist number uno, Eduardo Svart. Yeah, SVART, Jimmy 3D. Check out the network. That's BTC on TV. BTC Network Live. Every time I do what I do, I promise I will thrive. I came up from the bottom, but look, I survived. Even on Zoom, I'm fresh, I stay fly. Check it out, shout out to our hostess. She smiling, she wildin', she doing the mostest. I'm recognizing the phone, look like it's an eye. I'm looking in the camera, they see in my eye. I'm watching these demons in the sky, they spy. I do what I do, speak French, say moi. The kiss of life, that's what I give. Say as long as I'm alive, I'm live. Freestyle, bring it back. What I did today was kick it. Do what I do, can't lie, I'm feeling lifted. Can't stop the hip hop. Shout out to Aysha. I do what I do. Say, might go to Malaysia, might go to Chile, might go to France. Regardless where I go, I promise I enhance. Made it up on the spot. The people, they gon' dance. Hold up, Aysha, I see you with the phone in your hand. Don't be dropping. You can't go to the store though. They got us on quarantine. Still I can flow though. Everywhere I go, say I turn it to a dojo. Say I stay high and I don't need to smoke no more. I'm top, that's today. Yeah.
Hey.
Can't stop the hip hop.
Awesome. Thank you, SaulPaul. Hey. All right. Eduardo, you're going to bring in that heat from Chile, Santiago.
Yeah, I think that since I'm doing it from Chile, I will do it in Spanish.
Yes.
And I've heard that there's some people here that also like rapping in Spanish. And, and so I will try to freestyle in Spanish, and I will try to remember what I say and then translate somehow.
Okay, sounds good.
I think the important thing is the flow more than the message. Okay, vamos. Hay que romper los prejuicios para dejarse sorprender, es enseñar a amar, vivir, solo aprender. Hay que romper los prejuicios para dejarnos sorprender. Mira que enseñar a amar es vivir para aprender. Estamos conectados, estamos todos acá en cuarentena, estamos sacando las penas con el ritmo que te fluye. Mira cómo fluye, deja que te intuye, sacando palabras para ver cómo diluye. Mira que no hay distancia, estamos en la red. Estamos con los cabros de Harvard otra vez. Está Aysha, Saul y Pars tú. También está Bianca, Neal, escuchándome por ahí. Estamos todos en el globo sacando palabras frescas. Improvisación, tú sabes, tu cabeza pesca. Nos gusta romper barreras con este ritmo. Sabes que lo hacemos fino, tenemos este ritmo. Desde Chile para los Estados Unidos. Sacamos todo de siempre este latido. Mira cómo bajamos, siente y improvisa. Tú ya sabes que se va cayendo en la cornisa. Todo Latinoamérica y América unida. Tenemos rap, la avenida, hip hop en toda la sala, en la escuela. Mira cómo el ritmo adentro te deja secuela. Se me cuela todo por el borde de mi muela. Mira cómo la sacamos y hasta mi abuela. Se aparecen las palabras para acompañar el flow. Mira el ritmo bien latino que te trae sensación. Y aquí ya estamos cerrando, vamos terminando la conferencia cuarta. Es la anual junta de los cabros que se juntan, que se hacen los raperos. Mira cómo sacamos palabras, un sentir sincero. Y por eso yo le digo desde aquí, estamos mandando todo el fuego de Chile así, para que usted lo baile su casa, para que todo el mundo aquí se abraza, y aunque estemos en la distancia, no hay distancia que diluya. Mira este rap deja que intuya.
¡Vamos! Sí.
I don't know what I said, but in
It
general,
sounded great. It felt good.
I know that I heard Bianca Neal in the flow, but I did not hear a SaulPaul. But hey,
I tried.
You going off top for real? I heard it.
That was tight.
Yeah, well, basically, I was saying that there's no distance for this, and even though we're far, like we're in the same boat here, and we're trying to change the world into the same direction, with like give voice to those who need to speak their truth out, and to give ears for those who need to hear all these other people. And for me, it's like amazing to see all these talented, brilliant people that have like the same goals and are doing like the same style, the same stuff in different places. And I'm super honored to be here tonight. And thank you all for listening and sharing your wisdom. That's it.
Thank you.
In my head.
This was amazing. Oh my God. So much wisdom was given to us tonight on this panel about hip hop and criminal justice reform and what it means to our various communities and how important each of our work and role is in this space. So I just want to shout you three out again: Eduardo, SaulPaul, Bianca, for being here with us tonight, and for dropping your knowledge, for your rhymes, and for and also your art, just how beautiful that is. So thank you for sharing that with us. We didn't get to all of our questions. I'm so sorry. We tried. There was just so much to cover. I'll definitely send these questions. We'll send them to the panelists, so maybe they can have something written up for that or respond to that if they're able to. And we just want to remind you again that we have lots of different amazing panels happening this week and next week. So a reminder that tomorrow night we have Healing Through Hip Hop, the intersection of art, education, and revolution in communities of color. Same time, same place. We will be here. And yeah, Aysha, did you have anything to close us out with? Any other announcements to let people know?
Definitely not gonna freestyle. That's for sure. No, folks can just please keep spreading the word. I'm mad fuzzy right now, and I'm not sure why, but it doesn't matter. Thank you all for being here. Eduardo, Bianca, SaulPaul, y'all are a blessing. Y'all are a whole movement on your own. Son un movimiento fuerte. Gracias por asistir a nuestra conferencia, y cada año que hacemos eso están invitados. Every year that we do this, y'all are invited. 2 years in a row with SaulPaul and Bianca. Thank you. New friends. When we can get back on the plane, let's take this to Santiago.
Yeah, please.
This whole chat room is going. But yes, folks, please keep watch out on our social media pages. And our website is up and live, can'tstophiphop.org, if you want to learn more about our panelists. And we will be able to post links to the webinars that you may have missed for a few weeks after the conference. So thank y'all. Enjoy your evenings.
Thank y'all for putting this together, holding it down. Your hearts have ever been. Like, I love the pivot. Best pivot during the COVID-19, whatever. It's like, Rona took an L on that. Y'all did that.
Yeah, it almost feels like going out of the house.
Yes, it does. It feels like a good community we can all be a part of.
Well, I'm ready for the SaulPaul and Eduardo album, so.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. I got my
also, like, if there's still, I saw that there's a lot of questions going on, so like you want to hang out or like reach out on social media, Instagram, I will be very glad to answer and to keep this conversation ongoing through all other places that we can do it. Like, just feel free to ask and follow, you know?
Absolutely. Again, check IG, find them. We have their information on our website and our social media pages. So also a big shout out to our moderator. Thank you, Paris Stu. And thank you, Armani, for providing support. And we'll see you all back on these interweb streets tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, wait. Yep, never mind.